The Revelation Explained by F.G. Smith, Chapter 18. We begin with the Book of Revelation, Chapter 18, verses 1 through 3. And after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. We continue now with the commentary. A movement of mighty power is symbolized in these verses. The chronology of the events described in the preceding chapter brings us down to the time when the 10 horns turn against the papacy by depriving her of her temporal authority. This, as we have already seen, was completely fulfilled in 1870 and constituted the 5th plague. In the description of the 6th plague, which followed, it was shown that the great city which was invaded was composed of 3 parts: paganism, the modern form of the dragon power, Catholicism, and Protestantism. The same great city is here brought to view, and the angel from heaven with a mighty voice cries, Babylon the Great is fallen, is fallen. This fall of Babylon cannot signify a literal destruction, for there are certain events to take place in Babylon after her fall which entirely precludes the idea. For instance, the calling of God's people out of her, in order that they may not receive of her plagues. In these plagues is embraced her literal destruction or complete overthrow. The fall is therefore a moral one, for the result of it is that Babylon becomes the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Protestants who make any attempt to interpret these prophecies usually limit the designation Babylon the Great in these verses to the Church of Rome, because the woman symbolizing the apostate church in the preceding chapter is denominated Babylon the Great, referenced in verse 5. But the same verse also declares her to be the mother of harlots, and if she is a degraded woman, stands as the representative of a corrupt church, her unchaste daughters also must symbolize churches that are her descendants. And if the real name of the mother is Babylon, as stated, the proper name of her harlot daughters must be Babylon also. Whether, therefore, the mother or the daughters are referred to, it is all Babylon the Great, because it is all the same family, and it is part of that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. Referenced in chapter 17, verse 18. We must therefore have something besides the mere title Babylon the Great to determine which division of the great city is referred to in a given instance. whether pagan, papal, or Protestant. A careful study of the prophecy now under consideration will show that it has particular reference to the Protestant division of Babylon. It contained many of God's children, whereas paganism was always a false religion and never held any of God's saints. Under the reign of Catholicism, the people of God are represented in all the symbols of this book relating thereto as existing entirely separate from that communion. The description of this apostate church given in the preceding chapter shows clearly that instead of being partly composed of God's saints, she was their most bitter and relentless persecutor. Yea, was drunken with the blood of the saints, and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. This is definite proof that the present phase of Babylon under consideration is the Protestant division, and her moral fall is the grand signal for the escape of God's people who have partly composed her number, as the fall of ancient Babylon was for the escape of the Israelites. In their younger days, the Protestant organizations, symbolized by the daughters, were of much better character than the mother church from whom they descended. Many of them started out on reform. While a spiritual people, God worked with them. But when they made their image to the beast, they suddenly declined. And this voice from heaven finally declares them to be in a fallen condition, entirely void of salvation, except a very few chosen saints that have not defiled their garments contained therein. That this application of the term Babylon is correct, and also the fallen condition ascribed to her in accordance with the facts, I will prove by the following testimonies of Protestants themselves. The first is from Vision of the Ages, or Lectures on the Apocalypse by B. W. Johnson, member of the Christian sect. Quote, "It is needful to inquire what the term Babylon means. It occurs several times in the New Testament. Here in the Apocalypse it is spoken of as that great city, and her fall is doomed because she hath made all nations drunk with the wine of her fornication. In Revelation 17 verse 5, a scarlet harlot is sitting upon the 7-headed and 10-horned monster, and upon her forehead is written, Mystery, Babylon the Great. With this woman, the kings of the earth are said to have committed fornication. In chapter 18, the fall of the great city, Babylon, is detailed at length, and it is again said that all the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. The harlot with Babylon stamped on her brow, and the great city of fornication styled Babylon in chapters 14 and 18 are one and the same existence. There is an ancient city of Babylon, often mentioned in the Old Testament, but ages before John wrote, it had ceased to be inhabited. The only dwellers among its lonely ruins were howling beasts and hissing serpents. It has never been rebuilt to this day, and has passed away forever. John refers therefore not to the old Babylon, but to some power yet unseen, when he was upon the earth, that should be revealed in due time, and of which old Babylon was a symbol. Let us notice some of the features of ancient Babylon. 1. on that site took place the confusion of tongues, which divided those who before had been of one speech and one family into various tribes and schisms at variance with each other and of various tongues. The word Babylon, a memorial of this event, means confusion and is derived from Babel. Number 2, Old Babylon persecuted the people of God and destroyed the temple in Jerusalem. Number 3, it carried the people of God into captivity. Number 4, it was a mighty, resistless, universal empire. The antitype, the spiritual Babylon, must correspond. There is a power that exhibits all these characteristics. By apostasy from the truth, it originated the schism which has divided the family of God into different sects and parties, which speak a different spiritual language. It has carried the church into a long captivity by binding upon it the thraldom of superstition. It has been a constant persecutor of the saints and has enjoyed an almost universal dominion. That power is the woman that sits upon the seven-headed beast, the false woman, symbolical of a false church, the great apostate spiritual dominion of Rome. And we may add, out of which have come, directly or indirectly, all the religious sects of the present day. End of quote by B.W. Johnson. Dr. Barnes says, quote, "The word Babylon became the emblem of all that was haughty and oppressive, and especially of all that persecuted the church of God. The word here, in Revelation chapter 18, verse 4, must be used to denote some power that resembled the ancient and literal Babylon in these characteristics. The literal Babylon was no more, but the name might be used properly to denote a similar power." End of quote by Dr. Barnes. William Kincaid, in Bible Doctrine, page 249, says, quote, "I think Christ has a true church on earth, but its members are scattered among the various denominations and are more or less under the influence of Mystery Babylon and her daughters." End quote. Alexander Campbell says, quote, "A reformation of popery was attempted in Europe full 3 centuries ago. It ended in a Protestant hierarchy and swarms of dissenters. Protestantism has been reformed into Presbyterianism, that into Congregationalism, and that into Baptistism, etc., etc. Methodism has attempted to reform all, but has reformed itself into many forms of Wesleyanism. All of them retain in their bosom, in their ecclesiastical organizations, worship, doctrines, and observances, various relics of popery. They are at best a reformation of popery, and only reformations in part. The doctrines and traditions of men yet impair the power and progress of the gospel in their hands." End quote on Baptism, page 15. Again, Alexander Campbell says, quote, "The worshiping establishments now in operation throughout Christendom, increased and cemented by their respective voluminous confessions of faith and their ecclesiastical constitutions are not churches of Jesus Christ, but the legitimate daughters of that mother of harlots, the Church of Rome." End quote. How any man could possess as much light on this subject as did Mr. Campbell, and then build a sect himself, is more than I can understand. Lorenzo Dow says of the Romish Church, quote, "If she be the mother, who are the daughters? It must be the corrupt, national, established churches that came out of her." End quote from Dow's Life, page 542. In the Religious Encyclopedia, article Antichrist, we read, quote, "The writer of the book of Revelation tells us he heard a voice from heaven, saying, 'Come out of her, my people, that ye partake not of her sins, and receive not of her plagues.' If such persons are to be found in the mother of harlots, with much less hesitation may it be inferred that they are connected with her unchaste daughters, those national churches which are founded upon what are called Protestant principles." End quote. In the Encyclopedia of Religious Knowledge, we read, quote, "An important question, however, says Mr. Jones, still remains for inquiry. Is Antichrist confined to the Church of Rome? The answer is readily returned in the affirmative by Protestants in general, and happy had it been for the world that this had been the case. But although we are fully warranted to consider that church as the mother of harlots, the truth is that by whatsoever arguments we succeed in fixing that odious charge upon her, we shall by parity of reasoning be obliged to allow other national churches to be her unchaste daughters, and for this plain reason, among others, because in their very constitution and tendency they are hostile to the nature of the kingdom of Christ." End quote. One of Martin Luther's guests remarked that the world might continue 50 years, and he replied, quote, "Pray God that it may not exist so long. Matters would be even worse than they have been. There would rise up infinite sects and schisms, which are at present hidden in men's hearts and nature. No, may the Lord come at once, for there is no amendment to be expected." End quote. Mr. Hartley, a learned churchman, has remarked as follows, quote, "There are many prophecies which declare the fall of the ecclesiastical powers of the Christian world, and though each church seems to flatter itself with the hope of being exempted, yet it is very plain that the prophetical characters belong to all. They all have left the true, pure, simple religion, and teach for doctrines the commandments of men." End quote. Says Mr. Simpson in Plea for Religion, quote, "We Protestants, too, read the declaration of the third angel against the worshippers of the beast and his image, and make ourselves easy under the awful denunciation by applying it exclusively to the Church of Rome, never dreaming that they are equally applicable not only to the English, but to every church established in Christendom, which retains any of the marks of the beast. For though the Pope and the Church of Rome is at the head of the grand 1260 years delusion, yet all other churches of whatever denominations, whether established or tolerated, which partake of the same spirit, or have instituted doctrines and ceremonies inimical to the pure and unadulterated gospel of Christ, shall sooner or later share in the fate of that immense fabric of human ordinances." End quote. Says Mr. Hopkins, quote, "There is no reason to consider the anti-Christian spirit and practices confined to that which is now called the Church of Rome. The Protestant churches have much of the Antichrist in them and are far from being wholly reformed from the corruptions and wickedness in doctrine and practice in it. Some churches may be more pure and may have proceeded farther in a reformation than others, but where can the church be found which is thoroughly purged from her abominations? None are wholly clear from an anti-Christian spirit and the fruits of it. And as the Church of Rome will have a large share in the cup of indignation and wrath which will be poured out, so all the Christian world will have a distinguished portion of it, as the inhabitants of it are much more guilty than others. There is great reason to conclude that the world, particularly that part of it called Christian and Protestant, will yet make greater and more rapid advances in all kinds of moral corruption and open wickedness, till it will come to that state in which it will be fully ripe and prepared to be cut down by the sickle of divine justice and wrath." End quote. Mr. O. Scott, a Wesleyan Methodist, says, quote, "The church is as deeply infected with a desire for worldly gain as the world. Most of the denominations of the present day might be called churches of the world, with more propriety than churches of Christ. The churches have so far gone from primitive Christianity that they need a fresh regeneration, a new kind of religion." End quote. Said T. DeWitt Talmage, quote, "I simply state a fact when I say that in many places the church is surrendering and the world is conquering. There is a mighty host in the Christian church positively professing Christianity, who do not believe the Bible out and out and in. Oh, we have magnificent church machinery in this country. We have 60,000 American ministers. We have costly music. We have great Sunday schools. And yet I give you the appalling statistics that in the last 25 years, laying aside last year, the statistics of which I have not yet seen, within the last 25 years, the churches of God in this country have averaged less than 2 conversions at year each. There has been an average of 4 or 5 deaths in the churches. How soon, at that rate, will this world be brought to God? We gain 2, we lose 4. Eternal God, what will this come to?" End quote. I'm going to stop part 1 here. And we're still in the middle of these quotations, so we'll pick up the quotations in the next part.